Hey everybody, welcome back. This week we're going to talk about the Doomsday fantasy and what it has to do with the coronavirus. When I was in graduate school, I did work with drug addicts and alcoholics, and something that you hear when you hang out with people with that condition is the Doomsday fantasy. A lot of them have a fantasy that the world would simply end. Now, the common interpretation of this is, of course, that they want the world to end to save them the hassle of having to commit suicide. I don't think that's really what's going on. I think something more subtle is going on here, and this may shed some light on what's going on right now with the coronavirus, or maybe more specifically, our reaction to the coronavirus. I mean, the first thing we have to understand about fantasies is they're not really about what they're apparently about. I mean, so let's take a rape fantasy. That's a pretty common one that women have. Now, does this mean that a woman really wants that to happen to her? Well, no, of course not, but there may be some elements of being taken forcibly, let's just say, to put it delicately, that are appealing to a female psyche. Like, this guy is so overcome with his desire for the woman that he can't help himself. In a way, that can be appealing. Just that little nugget of the rape can be appealing to the female psyche. The male version of the rape fantasy, as I often say, is the schoolgirl fantasy. Does this mean that men want to have sex with a high schooler? Well, maybe some do, but I think most of the time it means there are certain elements characterized most strongly in high school girls that are appealing to men. So maybe a sense of innocence or femininity or bubbliness. Again, doesn't mean that a man really wants to go hang out in a high school parking lot around 3:30. Then there's the fantasy of being famous. You often hear this one. And all you have to do is ask somebody who has this fantasy a few probing questions, and you realize, wait a minute, this isn't about being famous at all. And men, it's usually about, boy, it would be a lot easier to meet women if I was famous. And in a sense, they project out this worldview in which they wouldn't have to face their anxiety around women. I mean, which just indicates how afraid men are in general about women. It would be easier to project out a worldview in which I was a famous rock star than to talk to the girl sitting at the other table in the coffee shop. And then with women and their fantasy about becoming famous, it usually is regarding a sense of wanting to be accepted or appreciated or loved. Again, generally speaking. Then there's the incest fantasy, which I know I talk about a bunch. Does this really mean you want to have sex with your cousin? No. But boy, from a certain perspective, wouldn't life be easier if you lived in this small, close-knit tribe where your relationships were arranged, like an arranged kind of marriage, and you wouldn't have to put in the work, all the work required to go out and meet somebody on your own. Not just the work of meeting somebody, but all the work you need to do on yourself. And you have to think, man, what kind of woman would be right for me, or what kind of person right? That's a lot of effort. Wouldn't it just be easier if we lived in this close-knit tribe? Again, doesn't really mean you may want to have sex with a family member. And I think this speaks to what's going on with the doomsday fantasy. Psychologically, probably, I'll just say the most anomalous aspect of our age, psychologically, is our isolation, is our attachment disorder. I mean, I know I've said it before, but it's not uncommon to meet somebody who's gone years, perhaps decades, perhaps their entire life without having a real sit-down, honest conversation with somebody, letting them know what is going on with them. So, I mean, there's just studies about this. In I think 1970 or 1960, the number of confidants that people had was around 4 or 5, the median number of confidants. And now, of course, the median number is 0. So, boy, just a real anomalous situation. Then you go and talk to drug addicts and alcoholics, who've gone through recovery. And now they're going to something like group therapy, and they sit around and think, I had a doomsday fantasy, and it was to get to a place like this. They didn't want the world to end, but they wanted something to happen so they would be in this bunker kind of situation, right? No cell phones, no internet. So you had to sit there and listen to somebody talk, and they had to listen to you, and there was no judging, no comparison, no need to one up, just a basic sit down. You realize, wait, that was the point of having the doomsday fantasy. So you get in this bunker kind of scenario. And I think our reaction to the coronavirus perhaps is a little overblown. I know I have some disagreement out there about that. Not saying it's just the flu, but maybe our reaction is a little bit overblown, and I can't help but think this speaks to people's doomsday fantasy. Is the world going to end? Are things going to be the same? In a sense, asking what people are striving for the most, I think, in this time is, oh good, maybe the world is going to end in a sense. Things are going to change, and we're going to be much more in touch with other people. We're going to be much more attached. And this isolation is going to end. This isolation of sitting in my apartment, isolated to such an extent that narcissism, it just happens. And we start to develop these fantasies that have nothing to do with what we really want. But all of this comes from connection. And connection will not happen until you really learn to connect with yourself, with your own emotions, and that's exactly what we talk about here at Animus Empire. Specifically, what you need to talk about to process emotions, to become ever more aware of what's going on with you, to create a better relationship with you, and what naturally happens from that. Once the hiding stops and the narcissism stops, then you can reach out and begin to connect with others, and it pretty much happens on its own once you do that. All right, guys, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, animusempire.com/schedule. We do free 30-minute consultations. And yeah, that's a good question that a lot of people are asking right now. Boy, is the world going to change after the coronavirus? Are we going to go back to normal? Well, I think the real question, based on the nature of the fantasy, is, are you going to change?